Under the blazing sun, a soft cry broke the calm of the savannah, grabbing everyone's attention. An elderly woman, all by herself, decided to follow the sound through the tall grass. With each step, her heart raced a little more. Suddenly, the grass parted, and a tiny, trembling creature popped up, its fur as white as snow and eyes full of fear. Everything seemed to pause for a moment as she knelt down and slowly extended her hand. What was supposed to be a regular walk was about to turn into something incredible. The sun was dipping low, casting a golden glow over the cracked, dry ground of the vast savanna. Far away, tall acacia trees stood strong, their twisted branches reaching up to the sky like silent guardians. On the edge of this empty land, there was a small hut made of mud and straw. It leaned a bit, as if worn out from standing up against the scorching sun and fierce winds for years. This humble abode belonged to Grandma Nia, a widow who had been living there alone for a long time. Grandma Nia stepped out of her hut, her back slightly hunched from age and hard labor. She wore a simple cloth over her shoulders and carried a woven basket in her hands, which were rough and wrinkled. Her eyes, lined from a life of hardship, gazed out across the horizon with quiet determination. The nearby village of Acacia was lively and noisy, a stark contrast to Grandma Nia's peaceful life. After losing her family during a severe drought years ago, she decided to live by herself. Barefoot, Grandma Nia walked slowly over the uneven ground, occasionally stopping to pick up dry branches and twigs to add to her basket. The only sounds were the distant bird calls and the gentle rustling of grass in the breeze, reminding her that life was still thriving in the wilderness. Despite her lonely and tough life, Grandma Nia remained strong. For a moment, she stood tall, adjusting her basket on her hip and glancing back at her small hut, a simple yet serene place she called home. Early morning, the sun hung low, bathing the quiet savanna in a soft golden light. Grandma Nia strolled through the open land. Her basket was already half full of twigs and dry branches. She took a break, wiping the sweat from her brow with the edge of her shawl. That's when she heard a sound. At first, it was barely there, just a faint noise over the gentle wind. She stopped and listened carefully. Then it came again, a weak, trembling cry, like a baby in distress. Her heart began to race as she scanned the grass and scattered trees, gripping her walking stick tightly. Following the sound, Grandma Nia moved carefully over the dry, crackling ground. The cries got louder, drawing her deeper into the wilderness. She pushed aside a patch of tall grass and stopped abruptly. On the ground was a small, shaking animal, its fur white as snow, standing out vividly against the brown and green of the savanna. The little creature was trembling, and Grandma Nia's breath caught. It was a baby albino baboon. Its big, scared eyes shimmered with tears. Another soft, helpless cry escaped the baboon, its small hands reaching out as if asking for something or someone. Grandma Nia felt her heart melt. She knelt down slowly, making sure not to frighten the little animal. "Oh, poor thing," she said softly, her voice calm and kind, like a mother comforting her child. "Why are you all alone?" The baby baboon flinched and hid back into the grass, its tiny body tense with fear. Grandma Nia didn't hurry. She remained still and quiet, moving as gently as a breeze. She held out her hand, palm open, showing she meant no harm. "It's okay," she whispered soothingly. After a moment, the little baboon stopped shaking so much. Its curious eyes looked at Grandma Nia's face, seemingly searching for reassurance. Slowly, its small, trembling hand reached out and touched her fingers. A warm smile spread across Grandma Nia's face. Carefully, she picked up the delicate creature, holding it gently in her arms. It was so light, its tiny body almost weightless. Its soft fur felt like silk under her rough hands. She cradled the baboon close, rocking it gently as if it were a baby needing comfort. "You're safe now," she whispered. The baby baboon nestled into her chest, its cries fading into quiet, tired whimpers. Grandma Nia felt a deep warmth inside her, a feeling she hadn't felt in years. Balancing her basket on one hip and holding the tiny baboon securely, Grandma Nia started walking back to her hut. As she walked, she spoke gently to the little one, her voice filled with love and hope. "I'll call you Keto," she said softly. "You'll be my little hope." As time went by, the small, fragile baboon Grandma Nia had saved grew into a lively companion. At first, Keto was shy and stayed close to Grandma Nia. He would cling to her shawl or sit quietly by her side as she worked on her baskets. But as days turned into weeks, he became braver. His curious eyes began to explore every part of the hut, and soon he followed Grandma Nia everywhere she went. One cool morning, as Grandma Nia went out to collect firewood, Keto bounced after her excitedly. His white fur shone brightly in the sunlight as he mimicked her every move, picking up small sticks and carefully placing them in her basket. Grandma Nia laughed, her voice echoing through the still savanna. "You're such a smart little helper," she said with a smile, gently patting his soft head. Keto chirped happily and ran to find more twigs. Months turned into years, and Keto grew big and strong. His slender arms became muscular, and his small body grew tall. Even though he became much larger, Keto stayed gentle and playful, always careful not to hurt Grandma Nia. He quickly became her best helper. He carried heavy bundles of firewood with ease, climbed tall acacia trees to gather sweet fruits, and brought water from the stream in a clay pot, balancing it perfectly. One day, as Grandma Nia worked on her baskets, she saw Keto tying bundles of sticks with a rope, clapping his hands in joy. "Keto, you've learned so much," she said, her face lighting up with pride. Keto grinned, holding up the tied bundle with sparkling eyes, proud of his progress. The once quiet hut now buzzed with laughter and energy. Keto filled every corner with his playful spirit. He loved swinging from the branches of the big tree near their home, his white fur glowing against the green leaves. Often, he would suddenly jump down to surprise Grandma Nia. She would pretend to scold him, wagging her finger, but always ended up laughing. Keto's cleverness amazed her. He seemed to understand not only her words but also her feelings. When Grandma Nia was tired, he would sit beside her, resting his large hand gently on her shoulder as if to say, "I'm here." On days when sadness crept into her heart, Keto would make funny faces or tug on her shawl until she smiled again. To Nia, Keto was more than just an animal. He was her family, her companion, and the light that filled her once lonely life. Their simple life brought her a happiness she hadn't felt in many years. But as Keto grew, rumors started to spread in the nearby village. People who caught glimpses of the large, white baboon whispered among themselves. "He's too big," some said uneasily. "No animal should grow that large." Others murmured, "It's unnatural. Maybe he's cursed." Grandma Nia ignored the gossip. She knew the truth. Keto wasn't a curse. He was a gift, her miracle. Nothing else mattered. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky orange and purple, Grandma Nia watched Keto swing joyfully from the tree branches. His happiness lit up the twilight. "You're special, Keto," she said softly, her voice full of love and pride. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Keto's size and intelligence amazed Grandma Nia, but news of the unusual white baboon soon spread throughout the village of Acacia. People talked about his strength, his large size, and even rumors that he could understand human speech. One day, Grandma Nia decided to visit the village market. She rarely left her home, but she needed supplies she couldn't gather herself. Keto walked by her side, carrying a small basket in his strong arm. His tall figure drew attention everywhere he went. As they reached the market, the cheerful sounds of the crowd slowly faded. Villagers turned to stare, and an uneasy silence settled over the area. Mothers held their children close, and men exchanged nervous looks. "Is that the white baboon they all talked about?" A woman whispered, "It's not normal." Another replied, her voice shaky, "Keto." Keto noticed the fearful stares and tightened his grip on the basket, lowering his head slightly. Grandma Nia touched his arm gently. "Don't worry, Keto," she said softly. "They just don't understand you." But her comforting words couldn't stop the tension building around them. When Grandma Nia approached a fruit stall, the vendor stepped back quickly, his face pale. You can't stay here," he stammered, his voice trembling. His eyes darted nervously to Keto. "That thing doesn't belong in the village." Grandma Nia frowned and replied firmly, "He's not a thing. This is Keto. He's part of my family." The vendor shook his head, refusing to look at her. Around them, the whispers grew louder. "It's a bad sign," someone said. "What if it hurt someone?" Keto shifted uneasily, feeling the fear and distrust in the crowd. His confused eyes turned to Grandma Nia, silently asking what to do. "Let's go home," Grandma Nia said calmly, though her voice carried a note of sadness. Keeping her head high, she turned and walked away. Keto followed closely, trying to make himself look smaller. As they left the market, the villagers' murmurs continued, soon turning into wild rumors. Some said they had seen Keto lifting heavy logs, as if they weighed nothing. Others claimed they had heard him make sounds like a human speaking. By the end of the week, fear and suspicion had twisted the truth. Some villagers began calling Keto a wicked spirit or a demon in disguise. "He's too smart for an animal," an elder said. "No creature like that should exist." When the dry season arrived, the savanna baked under the harsh sun. Grandma Nia, who had always been strong despite her age, started to grow weaker. At first, it was hard to notice. She moved more slowly and needed more rest. But soon, even small tasks like weaving baskets or gathering firewood became too hard for her. One morning, as Keto carried a bundle of sticks back to their hut, Grandma Nia stumbled and dropped her basket. She leaned against the tree, her breathing shallow and heavy. Keto rushed to her side, gently touching her shoulder. "I'm just tired, Keto," she said softly, trying to smile through her pain. "I'll be okay." But Keto could see the truth. Her hands, once steady and strong, now shook. Her steps were slow and unsteady. Over the next few days, Grandma Nia stayed inside the hut, too weak to go out. Keto took over her daily chores. He gathered firewood, brought water from the stream, and even tried to cook, though his big hands struggled with the small tasks. Every evening, he sat by Grandma Nia's bedside, his worried eyes watching over her. One night, under a sky full of stars, Grandma Nia reached out and took Keto's hand. Her touch was soft, and her skin felt cool. "You've been so good to me, Keto," she said in a quiet voice. "I'm so proud of you." Keto tilted his head, his bright eyes searching hers as if asking her to explain. She made a soft sound, pleading for answers. "I'm just getting old, my boy," she said with a gentle laugh. "My time is almost over." Keto shook his head, refusing to accept her words. He leaned closer, pressing his forehead against her hand. He couldn't imagine life without her, the one person who had cared for him and shown him love when no one else did. The next morning, Grandma Nia's condition worsened. Her breathing was shallow, and her voice was barely a whisper. Keto stayed by her side, holding her small hand in his large one, as if his presence could give her strength. By midday, Keto realized he couldn't help her alone. He needed someone who could rise to his full height. He looked back at her with concern before stepping outside. Grandma Nia gave him a weak smile, her eyes full of love. "Be careful, my boy," she whispered, her voice faint as the wind carried it away. Without hesitation, Keto sprinted toward the village, desperate to save the only family he had ever known. But as he left, Grandma Nia lay back in her bed, her eyes heavy with exhaustion. The small hut grew quiet, with only the soft sound of the wind passing through the open window. Keto ran toward the village, his strong legs moving quickly. His white fur shone brightly in the sun, making him easy to see as he dashed across the golden grass. As he neared the village, the usual busy sounds of life stopped. A woman carrying vegetables froze, her eyes wide with fear. Children playing with sticks dropped their toys and ran to their homes. "It's the white creature," someone shouted. Keto slowed down and raised his hands, trying to show he wasn't dangerous. He made soft pleading noises, hoping the villagers would understand, but all they saw was his large size and unusual color. Fear filled their hearts. "He's here to attack us," a man yelled, grabbing a stick. More villagers came out of their homes to see what was happening. Some picked up sticks, stones, and tools to defend themselves. Keto stepped back, his hands still raised, but the crowd moved closer, their fear turning into anger. "Get the nets," someone shouted. Before Keto could react, a thick rope net was thrown over him. He struggled to get free, but more nets came, wrapping around his arms and legs. He let out a loud cry, his voice echoing through the village. "Don't let him escape," another man shouted. As they tightened the ropes and forced him to the ground, Keto's golden eyes searched the crowd desperately, looking for someone who might help. For a brief moment, the villagers paused. His cry sounded full of pain and sadness, but their fear was too strong. They tied him tightly and dragged him to an old wooden shed at the edge of the village. Keto stopped struggling. He lay still, breathing heavily, his eyes filled with sorrow. They locked him inside the shed and hurried away, their whispers fading into the distance. In the dim light of the shed, Keto sat on the floor, his strong body slumped in defeat. He thought of Grandma Nia, her kind smile and gentle voice. He had come to save her, but now he was trapped, unable to help. A single tear rolled down his face as he closed his eyes, feeling the weight of his failure. Outside, the sun sank lower, covering the village in shades of orange and red. The quiet shed stood still, holding Keto's sadness far away at the little hut on the savannah. Grandma Nia waited and waited until she could wait no longer. Inside the dark wooden shed, Keto sat still, his large body leaning against the rough wall. His golden eyes, once full of curiosity, were now dull with sadness. The ropes around him felt heavy, like the weight of his failure. Outside, the villagers gathered in small groups, speaking in low voices filled with fear. Some paced nervously, holding sticks and tools ready in case Keto tried to escape. Others whispered about the white demon and what they should do with him. "Why did it come here?" one man asked, gripping a spear tightly. "Maybe it wanted to attack us." Another replied, his voice shaking. "No animal should look or act like that. It's unnatural." But not everyone agreed. An older woman, leaning on a walking stick, frowned thoughtfully. "It didn't look dangerous," she said softly. "It seemed scared." Her words were drowned out by louder voices of fear. "We can't risk it," a younger man said firmly. "It's too dangerous to keep it here." Inside the shed, Keto shifted slightly, testing the ropes around him. They were tight, and every time he moved, they only dug deeper into his fur. He let out a low, sad sound, thinking about Grandma Nia. He had left her to find help, but now he was trapped, unable to return. She was alone, and he had failed her. A young boy, curious but cautious, walked quietly toward the shed. He peered through the gaps in the wooden wall, his wide eyes meeting Keto's for a moment. They stared at each other. The boy's fear began to fade as he saw the sadness in Keto's eyes. "It's crying," the boy whispered softly. "What are you doing?" "Stay back." An adult quickly scolded him, pulling the boy away. The villagers kept arguing, their voices growing louder. Some wanted to get rid of Keto, while others hesitated. Finally, the village elder, Mr. Baraka, stepped forward. His voice deep and steady, he silenced the crowd enough to speak. "We cannot act out of fear. We need to understand why I came here." The villagers fell quiet, though their uneasy glances at the shed showed they were still afraid. Inside, Keto could hear their muffled voices, but he didn't understand all their words. His head lowered, his shoulders slumped in defeat. He wasn't scared of them. He was scared for Grandma Nia. She needed him, and he had no way to help her. In her small, simple hut, Grandma Nia lay still on her bed, her body weak and fragile. The soft, golden light of the setting sun slipped through the cracks in the wooden walls, gently lighting her face. Her breaths were shallow and slow, each one requiring more effort than the last. The hut was quiet except for the faint sound of the wind outside. Without Keto, the space felt emptier and colder than ever. Grandma Nia's trembling hand reached toward the door, as if hoping he would walk in at any moment. "Keto," she whispered softly, her voice barely more than a breath. Her tired eyes opened briefly, scanning the room for her dear companion, but he wasn't there. A wave of sadness filled her heart. Though she understood why he was gone, she knew Keto had left to find help. She was proud of his bravery, but deep down, she also knew the truth. Her time was running out. Her body had grown too weak, and her strength was fading fast. As she lay there, memories of Keto filled her mind like a gentle dream. She remembered the day she found him, a tiny, frightened creature alone in the wilderness. She thought of his playful ways, his kindness, and how he had brought light into her once lonely life. He had given her something she thought she'd lost forever, love and joy. A soft smile appeared on her lips. "You gave me so much, Keto," she murmured. "You were my help, my family." Her hand fell to her side, too weak to stay raised. Her breathing slowed further, each breath lighter and softer than the one before. With a final gentle sigh, Grandma Nia closed her eyes. Her face looked peaceful, as though she had fallen into a deep and restful sleep. The hut became silent, except for the wind's soft whispers, carrying her spirit to the heavens far away. Locked in the shed, Keto let out a sorrowful cry. It was as if he could feel the loss deep in his heart. The world around him seemed heavier, colder, and quieter, as though a piece of him had gone silent forever. As the morning sun rose over the village, Keto sat quietly inside the dark shed, his head hung low, his body tired, but his heart restless. A deep feeling of worry filled him, as if something terrible had happened outside. Mr. Baraka, the village elder, stood before the villagers. His calm voice broke the silence. "We cannot let fear guide us. If this creature meant harm, it would have acted already. I believe it came to seek help." The villagers whispered among themselves, guilt mixing with their fear. Mr. Baraka's words made them question their actions. Finally, one man nodded. "Maybe we were wrong. Let's release it." A small group of villagers approached the shed, tools in hand. Carefully, they opened the door.
"Sue."
Light streamed in, lighting up Keto's white fur. He blinked, adjusting to the brightness, and looked at them with cautious eyes. One villager stepped forward and cut the ropes. "You can go," he said softly, stepping back nervously.
"Keto."
He hesitated for only a second before standing without a sound. He bolted out of the shed, his powerful legs carrying him toward the savannah. The villagers watched, frozen, as his large figure disappeared into the distance. "He's going back to her," someone murmured. Keto ran as fast as he could, his heart pounding. The dry grass brushed against his legs, but he didn't slow down. His mind was filled with thoughts of Grandma Nia, her warm smile, her gentle voice. She needed him, and he had to get to her. When Keto reached the hut, the door was slightly open. He slowed his pace, carefully pushing the door wider. What he saw inside made him stop. Grandma Nia lay still on her bed, her frail hands resting on her chest, and her face looked peaceful, as if she were simply sleeping. But Keto knew she wasn't asleep. He moved closer, his large frame suddenly feeling small in the quiet room. Kneeling beside her, he gently placed his hand over hers. Her hand was cold. A soft, heartbroken sound escaped him, and his golden eyes filled with tears. Keto stayed there for a long time, his head bowed as though waiting for her to wake. But she didn't move. Hours later, the villagers arrived, led by Mr. Baraka. They entered the hut silently, their steps gentle. When they saw Keto kneeling beside Grandma Nia, their fear turned to sorrow. The elder placed a comforting hand on Keto's shoulder. "She's gone, my friend," he said softly. Keto didn't respond. His grief was quiet but overwhelming, a deep sadness that filled the room. The villagers stood nearby, their hearts heavy with regret. They realized they had misjudged him, and their actions had kept him away from the one he loved most. As the sun set, painting the sky orange and purple, Keto gently carried Grandma Nia's body to a spot beneath a large acacia tree near the hut. The villagers followed in silence, offering their quiet support. Together, They buried her in the shade of the tree she had loved. When the last handful of dirt covered the grave, Keto sat beside it, his large hands resting on the ground. He stared at the mound of earth, his face filled with emptiness. Words couldn't describe the villagers' feelings. They stayed for a while, watching quietly before leaving him alone. For days after Grandma Nia was buried, Keto stayed by her grave. He didn't move, his large figure sitting quietly under the acacia tree. The villagers kept their distance, but their feelings toward Keto had changed. Fear was replaced with guilt, sadness, and even respect for the loyal creature who had loved Grandma Nia so deeply. In the days that followed, some villagers began to approach him with small gestures of kindness. A woman left a basket of fruit near the grave. The village children sat nearby, watching him silently as he rested under the tree. Slowly, the villagers' fear melted away, replaced by admiration. One evening, as the sky glowed with shades of orange and gold, Keto finally stood up. He walked to the edge of the village and sat there, looking out over the open savanna. The villagers saw this as a silent promise, not that he was leaving, but that he would protect them as he had protected Grandma Nia. As days turned into weeks, Keto began to roam around the outskirts of the village. At first, the villagers were cautious, but they soon noticed he meant no harm. He chased away wild animals that threatened their livestock and even helped them during a dry season by leading them to a hidden water source. "He's not just an animal," a man said to Mr. Baraka one evening. "He's one of us now." Mr. Baraka nodded as he watched Keto sitting near Grandma Nia's grave, his sharp eyes scanning the horizon. "He was never a danger," the elder said. "He was a blessing." The villagers decided to honor Grandma Nia and Keto by building a small stone marker at her grave. It was a sign of their gratitude for everything she had done for the village and for the gift of Keto's loyalty and protection. Over time, Keto became the village's quiet guardian. His presence brought comfort and safety to the people of Acacia Village. To them, Keto was more than a protector. He was family. So, the moral of the story is, if you adopt a giant white baboon, be ready for it to become the village hero while you're stuck eating humble pie.
Disclaimer: this channel does not support or tolerate any form of discrimination, racism, prejudice, or violation of human rights. The stories presented here are original and created by the author with the aim of promoting reflection, awareness, and dialogue. All content is developed with respect for diversity and the dignity of all people.